Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Brickhouse. I'm the Provost. Welcome. So glad that you are here. This is kind of the panel session that gives you kind of a broad understanding of much of what will be talked about during this AI week, in which we brought individuals here to campus to talk through with us some of the emerging issues in AI. It's such an important initiative here at Baylor University to think carefully about how we integrate AI into both our teaching and our research. We talk about a Baylor education as being both cutting edge and timeless. Timeless in its valuing of the Christian values and our heritage, and cutting edge in terms of our ability to integrate cutting edge research and emerging technologies into our undergraduate and graduate education. So this aligns so beautifully with the future of Baylor, the progress that we've made, and I am really pleased to be able to welcome these individuals here today. I'm going to introduce the guests today very briefly, and they may want to say a little bit more about what they do, but I'll give a brief introduction and then hand the panel discussion off to Dan Pack. In fact, I'll start with Dan Pack. He's, of course, known to campus. He's our Dean of Engineering and Computer Science. Some of you may know he also is an expert in machine learning. Joining him is another Baylor faculty member, Dr. Robert Marks. He's a distinguished professor of electrical and computer engineering here at Baylor University. And he writes quite eloquently about AI and ethical issues related to AI and how machines and technology are different from being human. And so we're looking forward to his comments today. Also here is Dave Copps, who is known as a technologist. He's an entrepreneur. Some call him a futurist, but he doesn't like that, so we won't call him that. But we're very interested in hearing from him. He's the CEO of Worlds, and this is an AI-based technology. And he's Texan, comes from the University of North Texas. Dr. Stultz is joining us. He is the Nina T. and Robert H. Rubin Professor in Medical Engineering and Science, Professor of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, and co-director of the Harvard MIT Program in Health Sciences and Technology. That's a mouthful. Here, let me reduce it down for you. He's a computer scientist and a cardiologist. And he puts those two things together for us. Okay, and then finally we've got Dr. James Pitarresi. He's a distinguished teaching professor of mechanical engineering and serves as vice provost for online and innovation education at Binghamton University, State University of New York. And I'm going to steal a joke from him. And I'll tell you what this conversation is going to be about. I'll Baylorize it. Let's just say a mechanical engineer, an educator, an entrepreneur, a cardiologist, and a dean walk into a coffee shop. And this is what happens. I'll leave it off to y'all.
Thank you, Brickhouse. Provost Brickhouse, appreciate this opportunity for us. And thank you, our guests who have come as far as from Boston and others who came from Waco, Woodway, Texas. So welcome all of our panelists. So we're very excited about this opportunity to hear from our experts in different areas that they work on using AI. So as you heard, we have people who are from education, we have people from industry, and we have people who are working in health and medical field. So thank you all for being here. So I'm going to start with, we're going to have a time for question and answer from audience, but we're going to start by having each one of our panelists say a little bit more about themselves, if they like to, but talk a little bit about, this session is about the power of AI in higher education. So if you can talk, share your thoughts about AI's role in general in higher education that you foresee. So if I could start with Dr. Pitarresi, and we'll go from that end to Dr. Marks here.
Okay, this is working? Yeah? Okay, good. Um, and I'll be very brief so we can get a lot of conversation. And I think, as we all know, the AI genie is out of the bottle. Getting it back in will be very difficult, if not impossible. I think the challenge before us is how do we use this technology to really make society better? And universities play a critical role in that development. We get this incredible opportunity to work with bright young minds. We have great faculty and staff. So how can we as educators really put together programs that bring value to the education, where our students really feel that they're engaged with their learning and they're learning how to use AI tools as their superpower?
So I'm somewhat myopic about this in the following way. So what motivates me professionally are things that are going to make the patients that I care for better. So part of my life is at Mass General Hospital where I see patients, and then the other part of my life is running my laboratory that's heavily engaged in the development of machine learning and AI methods in this space. And I am a believer that AI is the future of medicine. I am also a skeptic that believes that AI may not be the future of medicine. And I'll try to reconcile some of those disparate views, I think, in the subsequent discussion. But I think the upshot being that there is a role for directed questions where AI can play a dramatic place in the care of those who are ill.
Yeah, so Dave Copps, I guess my role up here, I'm an entrepreneur. I've built 3 companies now based on machine learning and AI, and put that technology into a bunch of companies around the world. But from my perspective, it's more about I've always looked at AI as just our technology as a better way to solve problems. Because really AI for AI's sake or technology for technology's sake doesn't matter. It's how we use it to accomplish things that were maybe never possible before. And I think that is more true today than ever before. I think actually education and biology are 2 areas I think will change more than any other in this new age that we're in right now. But so my curiosity is really in kind of how are we starting to alter the experience of education. So now that we have this technology, this ability to we have it's no longer just a tool. How can we start to create this technology as infrastructure so that we can put underneath everything? So it's not just students and faculty, but it's administrators, and everybody can start to be lifted from this technology. So I think that's kind of where my curiosity is right now. I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, Robert Marks. I've been in AI for a number of decades, if you will. I entered at the end of one AI winter. I lived through another AI winter, and I have seen some over-promising, some hype, which is going on. And as an engineer, I teach control theory. Or I know control theory, I don't teach it. But one of the things in control theory is you don't want to overshoot, because if you overshoot, you begin to oscillate, right? And so we don't want to go all in on AI. We want to be very responsible, and we want to get a critical sort of asymptote to how AI is going to be related. I think that there's a number of different things we can do. I think that one of the things that we have to address right away is a negative aspect, which is the cheating with ChatGPT. Here at Baylor, at the Honors Council, they have lots of different things which come up. We got to figure out how to do that. And then there's the positive side also, and that's going to be interesting how we incorporate that into education. One of the things Dave mentioned, this is very interestingly, he will not hire a person who does software who does not use AI tools in the development of that software. So that's clearly one of the things that we need to do. So we need to identify things of that sort in order to go forward with the education.
Great, thank you. So as you're thinking about the questions to ask, I will start question to our panel here. So we heard quite a bit, not only yesterday and today, but in the media all the time now, how AI is playing such a big role in how we live, how we interact with others, and just the way how we spend our time. So the question that I have for our panel is that how we as an educators here at Baylor can prepare our students better for the future where they have to work with AI tools all the time. So I will let maybe Dr. Stultz to start that discussion.
So, just picking up on the earlier part of the question, you speak to some people, and the belief is that AI will solve all the world's problems, right? So there'll be world peace, it'll end hunger, and that's clearly nonsense. And then there are those who believe that AI is going to destroy the entire world, and that's nonsense too, right? So the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I think the challenge in teaching these concepts to students is finding where really is the sweet spot for these sorts of technologies. Chat GPT can be a bad thing if you're using it to write an essay from scratch. It can be a good thing if you're trying to write a piece of code in Python and you really just you don't really quite know how to begin it, and then you can ask ChatGPT to do it. I think the best way to do this is with hands-on experience. When we are there's a course that I teach at the medical school. It's an introduction to AI to novices. We want these to be clinicians who will become adept at understanding these concepts. And they have to sit there, and they sit with something called a Jupyter notebook, this environment that you use to write code and run these algorithms, and they find it very instructive. They will moan and groan as they go through the process, but towards the end, I think they really get an appreciation for how the things that these technologies can do and what they can't do. I don't think, in medical school, sorry, I'm being long-winded, I'll be really brief. Medical school used to say you'd see one, do one, and teach one. Right? And kind of scary, right? You think about somebody just out of medical school doing a procedures only twice or so. But I think there's some merit in that approach. You learn the concept, right? Then you learn to do it yourself, and the process of actually struggling with it, and it's another part of the course, and try to explain it to another novice helps to reinforce it. So I think that three vision paradigm, I think, is very helpful in teaching. I hope that makes some sense.
Dr. Pitarresi?
So I think we need to get away from the transactional nature of our teaching. If what we're doing, if what we're teaching, a student can just replicate that with ChatGPT or any other tool, then I think we need to reflect on, well, what is it that I'm trying to teach? We want our students to engage with the learning and question and encourage curiosity. And so if the assignment doesn't do that, then the value add, right, it just isn't there. So I think the challenge for us as educators is to really look at what we're teaching and understand where is the value of that? Where do I need to mentor the student through the hard part? Because learning is hard, right? But that's where the value is. That's where the meat is. And, or beans if you're a vegetarian, so I want to make sure I hit all the audiences. But how can we do that? How can we look at our classes, find out where there's value, help students to understand when the AI tools are fantastic and can save them time, and when they can be used as a creative consultant, as feedback, as I wrote this paper, can you look at it from a different perspective and give me feedback on that? I think that use of the tool is fantastic, and I think we as educators, the challenge is on us to figure out how to do that. Our students are using these tools. So, and I was very impressed with Elle earlier, a fantastic student here, was showing me amazing things she's doing with AI and the AI tools. So I'm convinced that our students are moving forward with these, we need to reflect on the teaching to match that.
So I'm going to come back to our entrepreneur here. In earlier talk, you talked about the skills that you would need from the people that will work for industry. It's not necessarily people who develops, but also more of people who can integrate and use different agents, AI agents, together to maximize the productivity. So if you can talk a little bit about that in preparation, preparing our students.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about is I think it's about understanding and amplification, right? So like it's one, I think we can use AI in a couple ways that will be way more beneficial than just subscribing to the platforms and using the tools, right? So which I think is kind of what we're all doing now. And one of these things is for universities to spend time on helping, how can we use AI to accelerate our understanding of things and to amplify our understanding of things. And that's something I think is not being done too well today with the platform tools and the frontier models. But I think I have this this vision of what if we all had our own AI, and we're kind of getting there. Whether it's going to be Apple on the device or whether it's going to be open source and we all have our own AI. But this thing that learns about us and learns about me and understands what I'm interested in and can amplify who I become. So it's almost like going home every night and it listens to the lecture with you, and you go home that night and you ask it, hey, I didn't get this part about that, and it starts to answer the question for you, like what you missed. Like that's different from doing the work. That's not cheating, right? So I think if you're asking AI to do something totally for you, that's cheating. But if you're working with it as a partner, as an agent, that's different. So well, the other question was just about what we look for when we hire someone. So, like engineering right now, if you're not using a program, an AI like Cursor or Replit or something like that, you're moving a lot slower than everybody else I'm talking to. And so there's just like coding, just like anything else in life, is there's 70% or 60% of what you do is very repetitive. It's some stuff that you don't need to be spending time on, and that's what these technologies do. Is they automate kind of the more repetitive tasks and give you the ability to spend the time on the more meaningful things. But so if we see someone that didn't use those programs because they thought said it was cheating, we're gonna say, well, why don't you go use them for a while and come back later? Let me know what you think. So I think we're looking for people that demonstrate a curiosity. So first of all, a real desire to solve problems, but then also their creative use of other, not just AI, but technology, the creative use of technology to be able to decipher, understand, and break down very complex things into smaller, more bite-sized chunks, and then people that work really well with others. So in colleges, it's not just about teaching them how to code in a certain language. It's about teaching them how to amplify what they can do by using technology, and to then apply what they've learned in industry. And so we're looking for kind of that complete package. Someone that's not just learned how to do something at school, but how to amplify what they're doing with technology and how to apply that. And once you've now applied it, can you now accelerate and build automation and things like that? So we're looking for this complete package like that. But so I think it really changes how universities need to kind of start looking at what we're producing with students. It's not just about giving them knowledge. It's about it's about showing. It's about a reinvention of how we're learning today. How we're learning is changing dramatically, and not to be afraid of that, but to embrace that. Like showing them how to use technology in a way that could, amplify who they are in ways that weren't possible before.
Go ahead, Dr. Marks.
Um, I agree with everything that's been said, engaging the student and et cetera, but this is something which you need to say about any technology, any change that comes along. I'm old enough to remember when I wrote out papers that I had to do them in longhand. And I gave it to a secretary, and she used a selectric where they would tonk, 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 and they just had to type everything out. That went to the point of where we had word processors, WordPerfect, and eventually Word for Windows. Microsoft swiped it. And all of a sudden, everybody had to use that, and that became part of everyday use. So technology changes things. You couldn't get a job if you didn't know Excel and word processing. Next came Google Search and Google Scholar. And I used to go to the library up to what they called the stacks. I don't even think people know what the stacks are anymore. It's where they had all of these journals up there, and I'd go and I'd look through for a journal article, and some jerk had ripped it out of the out of the book. But I have not been in a library in about 15 years, or maybe 20 years, because of Google search. So I've had to adapt to that. So I think what's going to happen with things like ChatGPT, I don't want to address AI in general, but things like ChatGPT, as James said, it's smoke out of the bottle, right? It's going to be here. What's going to happen? Well, in a few years, we're going to figure out how to use it, how to use it as professors, as students, and therefore it's just going to become a part of our everyday life, just like word processing and some of these other things that we take for granted today. 10 years, we're going to take all of this for granted.
Great, thank you. Baylor is unique, and Baylor's education is different in that we incorporate Christian values into our education. My next question for you is, what kind of, the reason why we brought people from medical field, from education, and from industry, we would love to hear what kind of ethical issues that you see in your field currently, and then maybe issues that you foresee in the future, if you can share some of those insights.
I think there's a number of things that one can say. Human beings by nature are biased. This is just how we are, and some people choose to acknowledge it and try to mitigate those biases, and some people choose to ignore them. And the data that we use to build models and that we train can similarly be biased in ways that are hard to appreciate. Models that we train, that we develop, and that we trust inherit our own biases. And so the onus is on us as those who are developers, those who are practitioners, at least certainly in the healthcare space, to try as best as one can to ensure that the things that you use in the treatment of patients do not propagate inherent biases that you have, and more importantly, that they do not propagate inequities in care. I mean, I think that's really was at the core. There's a vast array of research in this space. If it was easy to identify these biases and subsequent and inequities that are the result of these biases, then it'd be a very fast discussion, a very quick discussion, but it's not. And so that is something that a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about. It's something that my group spends some time thinking about, but that's one first and most prominent one that comes to my mind.
Go ahead.
It just reminds me of a story. I was asked to go speak with the police department in a city that wasn't anywhere near here.
That had nothing to do with you.
Nothing with me. That was college. I'll leave that where it is. And what was interesting is they were showing off this new policing system they created. So they met in the morning, and I'm sitting in there with them, and they were showing that, so we're predicting where crime is going to happen, and we're going to send them, send the appropriate number of officers there. And I got this look on my face like, you're doing what? And they thought this was the greatest thing ever, because guess what? Where they sent officers, they found crime. And I looked at them, I said, you guys, this is really bad. So first of all, you've taken data on certain areas that typically have crime, and now you're predicting that more crime is going to happen there. You're going to find it where you look. Like this is false positive, right? And the false positive is they find crime when they look. And it got even worse when one of the guys was telling a story, and there was someone that just looked suspicious, and he went and talked to him and found out he had a warrant, so he arrested him. But I was just terrified of that, because that's a terrible use of AI. To the doctor's point, if AI has a bias, it's because we've given it to it. We've given it data that's had it learn in a slanted way. So we have to pay more attention to that. And building AIs, that because in the end, we want AI to be unbiased, but again, it's an impossible thing. It's going to be biased in some way. It's always going to be biased because you're giving it data, and data teaches a bias. We all grew up in a different area with different families, and we grew up with different biases. Bias is something that's inherent in everything. So are you going to have AI that doesn't have bias? No, you'll never have that. You can just do the best you can. But anyways, I think the ethical AI is an important topic, but it's important we understand what we're dealing with. It's still back to us. AI itself is not biased. We make it biased. So we've got to pay more attention to that.
Yeah, AI without bias is like water without wet. You can't, right? You cannot have AI without some sort of bias. A couple of things. I came to Baylor 20 years ago because one of the gifts that God gave me is research. And Baylor was also a place where you could celebrate the Lordship of Christ. And I came here because I was a Christian and I was gifted to do research. And I have seen ethics taught from a secular level. And from a secular level, ethics taught today in a university is going to be different than ethics taught in Nazi Germany. And they are both going to believe that they are ethical. So I like the Christian viewpoint of ethics. And I hope that we continue to teach it from that viewpoint, because that's something that doesn't move. It isn't society dependent. The other thing I would say, as an engineer, there's two types of ethics, and I think these are ones that could be adopted. One is design ethics. You need to design a product that does exactly what you intended it to do and nothing else. This is sometimes difficult in AI, especially with ChatGPT. It did a lot of stuff that it wasn't expected to do. They didn't test it. They didn't follow the AI ethics. So that's design ethics. Then there is the end user ethics. That is what you use the technology for. Does a commander in a field deploy missiles? Does it kick in some sort of artificial intelligent missile? So those are the two types of ethics. And I think that the end user ethics is more addressed to what we usually think as ethics, in terms of right and wrong. But again, ethics is something which is taught to the AI. And if you teach AI only with literature that says the world is flat, it's going to respond the world is flat. So it is like water without wet, AI without ethics.
Good. Thank you. So at this time, I'm going to open the questions to our audience. If you have any questions, if you would raise your hand, we have a couple helpers in the back that will get you the mic.
Don't be shy.
Here's a question here in the front.
Hi, thanks so much. So one of the things you talked about was students coming here with their own AI, or students having access to AI and using AI, but we also talked about equity. So how can we help ensure that trying to teach these tools or infrastructure, that we're not exacerbating access inequity across our students? Not all students can buy textbooks right now, for example, right? Not all students will have come from K through 12 education systems with robust tech infrastructure where they're coming in with skills that lay a good foundation for becoming good users of AI at the college level. So what can we do in higher ed to help ensure that we're not exacerbating an existing inequity of skills in our incoming students?
Yeah, great question. I think the equity issue is huge. If a student can afford the $20 a month for the latest Claude or ChatGPT, and it's allowed to be used, or even if it isn't, that's an advantage over a student who doesn't have those resources. Yeah, there are free versions. access to those and some of the bells and whistles, if you will, aren't readily available. So that does create a big challenge. We're all exploring this. The idea, and not that you suggested this, but the idea that some expert's going to come in and tell you, oh, here's how you solve that problem. It's not going to happen. We're the help, right? The help, right? The cavalry's coming? No, that's us. We have to figure this out. How can we get these tools in the hands of students in a way that is fair and equitable? Do we use open source models, right? So Dave, we've talked about that, and you might want to chime in. Is that a way that you do it? I don't know, but you're absolutely right. We have students who can't afford textbooks. And I'm assuming on most campuses, on our campuses, we have food insecurity. We have students with food insecurity, right? There are real challenges. I think one of the huge advantages you have here is you have a unique blend of different schools here, the seminary, the law school, incredible student body, great faculty. You've got unique attributes here that with AI, you could really be jumping on some of these societal problems. And I think you could do it in a very unique Baylor way that no other institution has that unique set of conditions. And I'd love to come back in a year and see what kind of exciting things you're doing along those lines. I'm not interested in some new machine learning algorithm. There's experts are going to do that. I want to know how these things are being used to make this world a better place. I know that sounds corny, but I truly believe that.
Yeah, I'll just pile onto that. I think, you know, if you think about just what is tech, there's a question, what does technology want? Like, what technology wants is to be democratized, to be used by as many people as possible, to learn from as many people as possible through its use. But it also wants to be free. You know, we get in the way a little bit, you know, as we start to kind of create special versions of things that are only available to certain people and things like that. But, you know, think of where the world is heading right now, not just in AI, but with all technology, is it's like the Elon Musk thing, right? When he came out and built a car, he said, my plan's pretty simple. I'm going to make a really expensive sports car and use that money to build kind of a mid-sized car that's less expensive, and I'm going to use that money to create cars that everyone can afford. And he's still kind of going down that path now, you know, but that's kind of the way the world works today with technology, is that it's not about, can I build software that costs, you know, millions of dollars? No, it's about how can I build software that can be democratized, that everyone can access for a very small amount of money. That's what technology wants. It wants deflation. It wants lower costs. It wants democratization. So we just need to not get in the way. So in universities, you know, I don't know if it's part of your tuition or if it's a technology fee or something like that, but put it inside of an existing structure you have that you can get funded. You know, but maybe when someone comes to a school, that part of what they get is an AI, you know, that they can take with them, that goes to class with them and that learns with them and helps them be better. And so I think it's, you know, take it off the table. It's cheap. It's inexpensive, and now, you know, some of these OpenAI and people like that, they have to figure out profit models. So they're going to start working with colleges, the enterprise licenses. So it's not $20 a month per student, maybe it's $5. You know, so the costs are going to go down, they're not going to go up. I don't think. You will be able to buy premium versions and stuff like that, which kind of sucks. But I think the capability to get it in the hands of everyone, a very powerful technology in everyone's hands, is going to be there for us to deal with the current structures we already have.
Yeah, I think that there's some obvious places that AI can be used immediately in curricula. I think that one of the things is in the creative arts, such as example, creative writing. There are people that are there are professors that are starting to incorporate GPT into the creative writing. Also in the arts, there's an interesting case now that's being appealed to the US Copyright Office, where an award-winning artist got this big award and he wants to copyright his painting. And they say, no, Copyright Office says, no, we won't copyright anything that is generated by AI. It has to be generated by humans. Same thing for the US Patent Office. You can't list AI as an inventor on a patent. Well, anyway, this guy pushed back. He says, yes, I used AI, but I used it as a tool. I spent over 100 hours and 600 iterations, 600 different prompts in order to get that picture exactly the way that I wanted it. So I see use in the arts right now. And currently he was denied a copyright on it because it was generated by AI. But I think as when it's used as a tool in the creative process, it be it creative writing or creative imaging or such, that yeah, that should be copyrightable. And it should be something that we're teaching our students in the graphic arts and in creative writing, for example.
Thank you. I'll give it right back. So I think what I heard in part of the question was that there is inequity in terms of background and resources that one has in a classroom when you're trying to teach to a different to a heterogeneous group of people. And what I would say is that there are often in this space some fundamental concepts that one can teach that are not resource intensive, and that there are resources that you can avail yourself, online available, ChatGPT as it is. There are other sort of online resources that one can. So I always try to approach these things from what's the common denominator in terms of knowledge. What is the main concept I want to get across, and how can I do that efficiently without assuming that um, um, anyone has access to any particular resource. And I think that there's enough out there nowadays that you can do that effectively for most of the things that one wants to impart to students.
So that our three external guests would feel after their experience here at Baylor that Baylor is your friend, and then we feel the same way that for all three of you. As an example, we have in that sense, a great resource in all three of them. For Dr. Pitarresi, he's working with OpenAI to represent higher education, to advocate the needs of universities. So in that sense, you can forward some of I have not asked him about this, but you can forward some of the requests and some of your thoughts to him so that he can incorporate that as he talked to OpenAI. Let's go to the next question. Well, right here.
You said that AI is biased, yes? Wouldn't that only be the case for GPTs that are given limited information, limited data? What about if you give it unlimited data, all the data that is available in the world? Don't you eliminate some of the bias or all of the bias?
You can try to wash it out, but it's still there, right? That's why OpenAI in particular, no, as Google in particular, I don't know if everyone remembers this, but they tried to incorporate a bunch of DEI into the system, and when someone requested a picture of Nazis, they came back as people that were Chinese, and it just didn't work, right? And so it's not an exact science, right? It's almost like you throw a pebble over here and a pebble over here, but you don't know where they think when you remove something, it's going to affect everything else, and so it's not an exact science. The bias just happens naturally because there's information, and whatever was written about in the world is going to be learned from. Also, something we're not talking about yet is synthetic data. So 60% of all data training AIs last year was synthetically produced. So we're producing it. What's being produced? What's it about? Is it biased? We don't know the answer to these questions. So yeah, you do get a washing out. The more data you throw at something, the more kind of washed out bias gets, but it's always going to be there. And and then there's just the real world, right? You look at like what Elon did with X, right? And that's just it's more right, and then Facebook's more left, and it's just a matter of who's playing in that environment, right? Because we always have this thing called reinforcement learning, human feedback, right? So you train an AI initially by giving it data, but then it learns by interacting with people. So the other question is, who's interacting with the AI? And is that injecting bias? And so it's a really hard question. I don't know that if someone tells you they know an answer to that, they're lying. There's not an answer right now. It's just about, we're living in the experiment.
I just want to add just one thing. So it is, at least it's not my premise that AI is biased in and of itself. And I think some of these definitions are becoming a little bit conflated. So, artificial intelligence, span of methods that impart intelligence to machines. Whose intelligence? What does intelligence mean? Right? We could parse that a little bit, and you could kind of see where the ambiguity goes in. And machine learning is the subfield of artificial intelligence where machines learn from large data sets. How does this happen? Who assembles the data sets? For what question? Where do the data come from? So it's in practice, when you talk about how these things are trained, how these things are developed, I think that bias enters in. All data sets are finite, right? So we can talk theoretically about what could have all types of data from it's everywhere generated, but in practice, you have a finite data set that you're using, and that data set has been assembled according to some rules that have been dictated by some individuals. And it's in that way that, in many instances, that bias can, what's the word I want to use, leak in, or by osmosis, find its way into the algorithm. And moreover, how the algorithm is evaluated. How do you know that the algorithm is successful? Right, so in the healthcare space, we have methods. We may want to predict who's going to have a heart attack, who's not going to have a heart attack at some point in time. How do you evaluate that? What data set do you use to evaluate that in? Do you evaluate that in a group of, in Zimbabwe? Do you evaluate it in New York? Do you evaluate it in California? The performance is going to vary depending on the population of interest that you choose to study. So it's in many, many ways. I think these bias can leak into the application of specific algorithms as they're being designed and used.
Yeah. Okay. It's my turn. Okay. One of the things about systems in general, as an engineer, I know, is that as the complexity increases linearly, the way things it can do, the different ways that it can respond increases exponentially. When ChatGPT first came out, it was very clear it leaned towards the left. You could ask it questions about Democrats and Republicans, and because all of these results are not available. You have billions of moving parts, knobs that you can turn in ChatGPT in order to train it. And so it's very complicated, and it's very hard to trust a very complicated system. That's the reason I don't think I would mind riding in one of these new self-driving cars, because the system itself is relatively simple. They have applied the AI or the design ethics. They make sure that the car does what it's supposed to do and nothing else. That's the problem with general AI. So OpenAI has been spending the last years putting Band-Aids on all of the cuts that come out. We have just terrible stories about a girl that asked, what can I do that was fun and dangerous? And it came out and it says, well, you should plug something halfway into the wall and put a penny between the prongs. Okay, that clearly should be censored. And I'm sure that AI went and put a Band-Aid on that. And currently, they put a Band-Aid on so much stuff that they've actually banned it. You can go in and ask them to draw a picture of Harris and Biden in boxing, and it will come back and it will say, no, I can't do that. So in order to avoid these problems, they just blank out a lot of stuff. But it's either Band-Aids or blanking out, and this is going to continue, I think, for a long time, because the way that AI can go wrong is so big.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question.
I have a question. So it seems to me one possible use of AI is in classroom instruction around tutor bots. I mean, we've been talking about how do you make greater access to education, and certainly some of the claims are that tutor bots help students who need more help in particularly challenging classes, and Khan Academy certainly created a lot of tutor bots. I'm particularly interested in these tutor bots in the online space, just because it seems to me like that's an obvious place where they would be so easily integrated, but I don't know that that's been done yet. So I'm just curious kind of what y'all's experience has been in this particular space, and does it lead to the outcomes claimed?
It's funny because, in my world, one of the big uses of AI is to create virtual customer service reps, And the way you do that is you give it all the product information that's possible, and you give it to a conversational AI so people can ask questions in natural language and get results back. When you think about it, that's not really much different from a tutor, right? And so why isn't one of the things that universities create is these virtual tutors, where a student anytime 24/7 wants to have a conversation with an expert on a topic that they're interested in, they can have that, that conversation. Talked about I talked earlier about this guy that friend of mine who created the Socrates and Plato, and then as all the writings they ever had, and they created them as avatars. You could have conversations with them, and even have them converse with each other. You know, um, but what's interesting is now that English is the new programming language. And it's the way that we can talk with AIs right now. All of this is possible. So I think one of the things that we can do at a university is start to take advantage of the vast amount of resources we have and start to animate that. Like let's build these repositories of very specific data and turn them into virtual experts that students can have conversations with. And so when you didn't get something at class and you can't get a hold of your teacher, you can get online and pull up your phone and ask the tutor a question. You know, and the other thing is that becomes a dynamic resource that's always learning. So we talked about the reinforcement learning, human feedback, right? So you train an AI by giving it information, but then it learns by interacting with people and the experiences it gets by talking with people. So this would become a resource that just gets better and better the more the students use it. But it's another thing that university could start to create, right? That creates an environment for students that where they can get answers where they could never get it before, at least anytime they want, 24/7.
Hi. I don't want to, I'm not an expert at all, and I don't want to come off as a Luddite, but I am to a certain extent. So I'm just wondering about the societal effects, and you've touched on it a bit. There's going to be a change in society. There's going to be a lot of jobs that are gone and other ones that appear, but there's going to be a certain amount of time in between that's just chaos. Likewise, the AI revolution and the foaming, or fuming, how do you say that? Fuming? Yeah, is going to chew up a lot of energy, and apparently a lot of companies are buying nuclear reactors to drive their AIs, and this seems like an ever expanding consumption of societal benefits that is going to go into this. Is it worth it? Is there what kind of roadblocks or what kind of training wheels do we put on it in order to control the effect of it and to make the best benefit of it? And I'm sure you all have different opinions. I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I'd love to answer on that. You're exactly the type of person that needs to be involved in AI. We're at a point now, again, you know my position. Whatever algorithm is being used, I really don't care. I'm interested in how these systems can be used. And having opinions like yours is very important. What is the impact on us humans and the way we learn? Look, we unleashed social media on the world, and look at the impact it's had. You could talk about the positive and negative, but there was no a forethought on that. It evolved. It got it grew. It changed. It morphed, and it's had a very profound impact. I think AI is even more impactful, or can be. So we need, that's part of the reason why you're having this forum here and having different guests with perspectives. We got to have this conversation. We got to figure this out together, right? There's no expert saying, oh, just do this and it'll be okay. We don't know. So how can we pull as many different voices and experiences, knowledge from all the stakeholders, right? At a university, faculty, staff, and students, the broader community, right? I think it's absolutely critical to be asking these questions. Do I have the answer? No, right? I don't. We can try things, but we got to have the conversation. We cannot ignore it.
I must have said something better because they turned it back on. So I think for now. I would say that, so certainly the economic consequences of different AI algorithms, I think you're spot on, that it is, the initial aspects of this will be negative. I do think, however, that the conversation is a more important conversation is at a granular level, because there's a cost-benefit analysis that has to go in with any of these technologies. And in the healthcare space, I think it's unquestioned that the benefit, as opposed to the risk, at least the potential there, I think is there, and argues strongly that these are things that should be pursued and implemented with great fervor. There'll be a time, for example, where less people will go to the hospital because the sensors that you have on your phone or on your watch or will be available in your home will be able to diagnose different disorders and relay information to a healthcare provider who can provide it back to you in terms of actions that you can do to prevent an adverse event like a hospitalization. So for me, the granular discussion is one that I can parse. It's one that I can get my head around. But general statements about this, the trends, the short-term trends are, I think, are concerning. The long-term trends in different areas are unclear.
I believe that no matter what new technology is introduced, there's going to be dangers, there's going to be benefits. You can go back in history in the simple example of the introduction of electricity. Okay, electricity has a lot of benefits, as we know, but it also has bad things with it. You know, linemen still get electrocuted, fray wiring still burns down houses, yet we've learned to adapt and use it to the best that we possibly can. My hope that is AI will develop in that same way. Yeah, there will be negative uses of it, just like electricity, but there will also be the positive uses of it. So I'm very excited about what's in the future.
So one other thought regarding this is that some of these problems will be solved by economy and profitability. So one example would be the data centers that use electricity in churning out or having these AI machines to learn. It turned out that because the electricity cost different different value at different time of the day, that it was found that they would use those computing power at night when people are not using much electricity. So that's the way that they would use those energy, although limited, more efficiently than at the cost of others who are using that energy. So that's another way of look at how it will be resolved in the future.
I'll pile on to that. I think innovation drives progress. So that's why we have startup companies, and that's why we spend so much money on research. Is that innovation drives progress. You think about the internet, right? So we had a bunch of cables in the ground and telecom providers, but then we realized we want to push gigabytes of data through every second. So then we created fiber. Now we're literally moving information at the speed of light. Now we created an infrastructure, a backbone for the internet, so we could all share information at the speed of light. Now what's happening is we're realizing that now it's not just about accessing information, it's about accessing knowledge. So now that we compress the knowledge of the world's information down to literally compressed it to a 175 gigabyte file, and we can all interact with it. We can all have the knowledge of the world's information at our fingertips, right? So what we need to do that is have data centers. So now I think the OpenAI guys are up in Washington talking to the government about building 5 3-megawatt data centers, where a 3-megawatt data center can power a city of 3 million people. But we're going to build 5 of those, and there's 1,200 data centers currently in existence that are all getting upgraded. So that's the AI version of the internet. That's what's happening right now. Is we're building the backbone for AI, so that we can now, expedite and accelerate discovery and expedite, the elimination of disease and I think we're gonna find new biology and it's just is it worth it? Yes, it's worth it. The positive sides, if we throw away the doomer stuff for a second, the positive side of this thing is that it could be a real utopia. Literally 7 years from now, right? 7 years, just think of that. It's not that long. You're going to have massive data centers being completed. You're going to have new algorithms. You're going to have bigger and better, faster chips, and you're going to have micronuclear fusion powering these data centers. Like, what's going to come from that? It's hard to even imagine. It's hard to even imagine. But your field is going to be transformed. It's just transformed. We'll all have incredible healthcare. And the costs will get lower and lower and lower. And that's what's coming.
Good. Let's move on to the next question that you have.
My question is about the tutor idea, which seems to me, I don't know anybody who would argue that a personal tutor is not, way better than the classroom or a lecture presentation as a way to learn. And if AI provides personalized tutors for every subject, which seems quite easily within reach in the next couple of years, what's left for a university to do? Or how does the university operate in an environment where 16,000 students all have their personal tutor? Are they just here for the homecoming parade, or dancing on stage, or the fraternity and sorority? How do you see it functioning? I want to be on the positive side of this, but
Sure, and I'll start off on that. You haven't been to one of my lectures, apparently. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so the tutoring, and your provost asked that question earlier. I think it's an obvious place where we could use the tools now, appropriately trained, not to give the answer, but to guide the student. We have tutoring now, making it more available 24/7. At the core of your question, I think, is what is the value of the classroom experience? And I keep coming back to that. We as educators have to make that classroom experience engaging, a place where students are actively engaged with the material, with their learning, right? We cannot give students knowledge. We can give them information. They have to turn that information into knowledge. By developing the classroom activities, maybe it's group activities or what have you, such that they're engaged at that level of learning, then the tutor is there to help them with assignments. They're struggling with a concept, that tutor can hop in. What I'm excited about is if I can save some time doing some of the tasks I would normally perform for the teaching part of my job, I'd love add more office hours so that I can be even more available, or go ahead and head over to the innovation lab and just hang out and walk around and talk to students and see what's going on. So I think, is it possible that we take all of my knowledge, put it in a tutor, and no one needs me anymore? They just, fire up my avatar and off I go. I start pontificating about something. I don't think that's the case. I think it's more, I would love to have, for example, I took my notes from last semester, put it in Google's Notebook LM, and I'm going to share that with my students because it has a study guide, it can answer questions about my notes, and it will only answer based on the material in that notebook. So I think these types of tools in the hands of the students are fantastic, but we have to get back to high quality engagement with students, drive their curiosity, get them actively engaged in learning, and they'll show up. Right? They'll vote with their feet. They'll come to class because there's value in the class. They want to interact with you. Your experience, the things you've done, that is value added. They can't get that someplace else. Maybe someday they can get it in AI, but not yet.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that, this idea of the necessity of professors was actually asked a couple of years ago about taped courses and things you can view online. Do we need the professors? one of the things I think we need to remember, and I'm not a psychologist, but it just seems to me that we can't remove the human element. We have all had teachers and professors that have influenced us. Many times these professors have influenced us to pursue the careers that we're currently involved in. You go to a total AI tutor, and you're going to lose that human influence. So I see the tutor as maybe helping or replacing a teaching assistant in office hours. But as far as the professor and the interaction with the professor, with the students, I think that would be a big mistake.
I'm going to pile onto that. I became an entrepreneur because I met Dr. Louis Ponte. He's a professor at UNT, and he made me the first president of the entrepreneur club at UNT. Funny story, actually. We had a school project where we created programs, and I created little companies, and I created a company that made $40,000, and I had to give it to the school because I couldn't keep the money. But I totally agree with what Dr. Mark said, because when people get together, there's a variability that happens in human interactions that's not possible in computing. Computing, everything's probability. The variability, I know this because of my current business. We try to measure the real world, and the area that's hardest to measure is anywhere people touch things, because the variability goes to the roof. And so that's a good thing when you talk about interaction between students and professors and students inside classrooms. The variability that happens inside that interaction is a unique thing that we need to kind of grasp onto. And the question becomes, how do we alter the experience of education and really start to pour fuel on that fire? And I totally agree that tutoring is a great thing, but it's not a great way to experience education. It's a way to figure out the things you didn't get. But it's not the way to. It's not primary learning through AI tutoring. I don't think that's a good way for primary learning. Primary learning should be happening in the classroom. We should be talking about how we can reinvent the experience of education in the classroom. That should be a topic.
I'll just add that I think there's some data in this regard during COVID. So at MIT and at Harvard, the places, all of the teaching was as different than a tutor, but was not in person. And all metrics of student satisfaction, learning went tremendously down by quite a bit. I think this tutor business. I think if someone could create a digital twin of every student in the class, and that digital twin was infallible, and you could understand precisely what that student did not truly understand and answer the question, then I think that sort of maybe competes with the classroom in some way, shape, or form. But the classroom, I think the student learns, but the person who's teaching also learns, because they learn how to interact with the student. They learn about the questions and the concepts that are not clear, and they modify typically the next lecture or in how they interact with the students to make those concepts. And that, I think, is my sense is that's the special sauce that happens in the classroom. And that's the thing that is exceptionally hard to replicate with any AI algorithm. And I'm not sure that could happen in my lifetime. There are many people here younger than me, so maybe a few people in this room, maybe in their lifetime, maybe, right? But certainly not in mine.
Well, thank you. If I may add just one more thing, I agree with what has been said. It's time for all of us to rethink about how we teach, how students learn, and what we need to teach. And I would say, I might suggest that the best way to think about this is for each course is a different student learning objectives. So what are student learning objectives? And if there are some that can be learned by just talking with ChatGPT, that's probably not a good student learning objective for that course. So I think that kind of exercise that needs to be done for each class. So we have time for one last question, and then we will close our panel session.
Well, I'm a teaching and learning guy, but I'm actually going to ask a question about another function of higher ed or another function of our university, and that's research. We have an interesting blend here, especially with the medical expertise, someone who knows the AI and the machine learning, and then what industry can get from what the university produces in advancing knowledge. And so I'm curious about where AI can be leveraged, or if we're on the cusp of AI being something that is used in research, not just in a computer science model, but Mr. Cox, you were talking about the compression and the amplification of knowledge that we can look and learn about from data. Are we on the cusp of curing chronic diseases based on new abilities to research the data or mine the data or do the analysis? Are we looking at new forms of chemistry and technology that's going to affect industry, and how close are we to being able to see that, and how can higher ed or how can our research leverage that and be a part of that AI enabled world?
Yeah, I'll start, but I imagine everyone will jump in on this one. Yeah, if you want to be fascinated, go home tonight and Google agentic AI, or go to ChatGPT or Claude and ask them, tell me about agentic AI and what it means for the world. Like an agent. Agentic, yeah. And so we're on the cusp of this now. It just started literally, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, where the ChatGPT guys released Strawberry 01, and but it's just what's happening now is that really, even with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, Llama, all those, it's still very transactional, right? When you go, you ask a question, you get an answer. Now it's starting to remember your conversation, so it gives you better answers, but it's still transactional, right? Agents are forming right now that are for now an AI agent can have goals. So instead of asking a question and getting an answer, you can actually send an agent off, or a series of agents off, a swarm of agents off, to go solve a problem that might have multiple steps, up to 200 steps. And the agents not only can follow these different steps and try different things, they can have reflection. Like after they do things, they can look back and see how they did and grade themselves, and get better and learn over time. But they also can have chain of thought. Chain of thought is this thing that we all do naturally, which is you take a complex problem, you break it down into smaller things. Well, now these AI agents can do that too. They can have chain of thought, they can have reflection. We have this another technique called scaffolding, where we can start to build infrastructure underneath these agents. So if I'm in a research institution right now, I'm really freaking out in a great way, because I think your world is about to change in ways it hasn't in decades. And it's all going to happen in the next few years here. The stuff that's out right now is not quite there yet, but give it a year, give it 2 years. I think in 2 years we'll have, more than 1 billion agents out there doing things. And but take what I just told you about a single agent, right, and multiply that by 100, and then 100 times 100, right, because they're interacting with each other and teaching each other and learning from each other. You'll be able to send swarms of agents out and have the ability to start to incorporate techniques like voting. So when you have several agents going out trying to get an outcome, you bring them back and you can vote on which ones had the best outcome and choose the best result. And but orchestration and all these things. But if you're a research person right now, you're going to spend a lot of time working with agents. And I think we'll see discoveries literally in the next 5 years that could equate what's happened in the last 100 years. It's the acceleration that's possible is mind-boggling. I think it's the most important innovation in AI in years.
And I'll just add real quick. I think simply, when the NSF puts out an RFP, you can ingest that into ChatGPT and have it explain what's going on. You could then, it's the best brainstorming tool out there. It's the best question storming tool out there. I like to question storm before I brainstorm. I want to understand. I want to fall in love with the problem. I want to ask questions about the problem. And then I want to brainstorm on potential solutions. So from a research perspective, we were talking earlier, I'm putting together an NSF NRT proposal, and I brainstorm with ChatGPT all the time. It critiques my proposal. I've showed it examples of winning proposals in the past. Can you, using that, look at my proposal? So in a very simple way, I think your question was more breakthrough science, and I'm at a very simple level of writing a better proposal, right? Because to do the science, you need the money, and to get the money, you got to write a good proposal. So I think on a very simple level, it is a phenomenal tool for that brainstorming process with the team developing the proposal.
So I'll say that although a large part of my professional life is in the medical space, I'm a professor of computer science, and my research group is actually engaged in fundamental some of the, development of machine learning methods. The application domain is in medicine, but a lot of it is in that area as well. I think research, especially when it is applied, I think is the most in this domain is when two people who really don't speak the same language get together and try to communicate. So you've got like an egghead like myself or the people in my group that think about these things at a fundamental level, and somebody with a real problem that is important. And communicating with another area of expertise, you find new avenues and that to me is really exciting. There are a host of problems out there. I think that there are techniques that one can apply in very fruitful ways, but are as yet unrecognized. So I'm a big fan of like these of hubs where people with different areas of expertise come together and communicate and sit in a similar space, eat from the same establishment, and have conversations. I think that's where a lot of new and novel breakthrough research has come, and there's plenty of examples of that in the biochemistry, chemistry, and medical space.
So we're going to go ahead and close this session. And what I would like to do is give each of our panelists 1 minute of a closing remarks, starting with Dr. Marks, and then we'll close our session with your remarks.
I think Dave said it right. AI is a different type of intelligence. We are human beings, and we display exceptionalism beyond the capability of artificial intelligence. If you define it correctly, if you define it correctly, you can make the case, which I have, that AI can never itself be creative. It thinks inside the box. It thinks inside of the data that it was trained on. So it can't be creative. It doesn't understand what it's doing. It can add the numbers 3 and 7. It doesn't understand what the number 3 is. It doesn't understand what the number 7 is. So there's no creativity and there's no understanding. And so there are many things. Those are less obvious. The more obvious ones, which I think have been pointed out, are love and empathy and the emotions that we as human beings feel. So I think that we need to develop AI indeed as a tool, but also remember that we are, as it says in Psalm 139, fearfully and wonderfully made. We can do things above and beyond what AI can or ever will do.
Okay, Mr. Copps.
I just think it's time to. Yeah, I'll start with piling on a little bit. We are building something very different. We're not building another human intelligence. We're building a non-biological intelligence. It's very different from where we are. And if we're smart about it, we can augment ourselves with this new thing that we're creating and do things that were never possible before. And that means also reinventing education. Like, let's start to reinvent what it means to how we learn. And if you're going to reinvent how we learn, you also have to reinvent how we teach. And so, but taking on these conversations are big, but the possibilities are endless right now. I mean, if you AI gives us the ability to amplify and accelerate yeah, I think it could be a complete reinvention of a university. And I don't mean that like I don't want to get too far out there, but what I'm saying is like it's an opportunity for us to really look at how we could start to reinvent how we learn. And if you think about it, like I tell people, the thing I got from college the most was not the things I learned; it was how I learned how to learn. That was the most important thing I learned in college. And I think that we could start to ask ourselves questions. How can we create environments? How can we create infrastructure that alters what's possible in the way that students can learn? I think that would be a great thing to start thinking about and then looking at over the course of the next year.
Great. Dr. Stultz.
So I would say, these tools are here to help us, but trust but verify, right? I don't know if you guys remember that. Yeah. So that's actually a very valuable statement. I think AI is, in many instances, an entity that can make our lives better and easier, but much of this should be viewed in a sort of a skeptical way. There are many reported examples of people asking ChatGPT detailed questions for which it is ultimately wrong and categorically incorrect. So I think we're still trying to sort out the sweet spot for each of these methods, and I am an advocate of these methods. I think that they can be, but I think blind faith in them, I think, is somewhat misguided.
Agree 100%. Trust but verify. Spend 5 to 10 hours playing around ChatGPT, Claude, whatever, and see what it's good at, what it's not good at. Check it. Right? We were talking earlier. What's the population of a given city? It's going to give you an answer, and it's going to be authoritative in that answer. Is it correct? It has no idea. Right? So trust but verify. Find out what they're good at. Ultimately, I find it for $20 a month to be an incredible assistant that is available to me whenever I need it, and I can have it act as an expert in different areas. And I love the feedback that it gets, but ultimately, try it. If you don't like it, don't use it. But your students are.
With that note, let's give our panelists thanking for their time here together. And Dr. Brickhouse.
I just want to plug the sessions for tomorrow. Dr. Stultz will be back in this room tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock talking about AI in healthcare. And then at 1 o'clock, Dr. Pitarresi will also be in this room, and his talk will be on AI for education. So hope to see you there. Thank you so much. This was a delight.